My husband leaned toward me at the long oak table and whispered, "Don't react until your mom leaves." The syllables barely disturbed the air between his lips and my ear, but they shook something loose inside my chest, like a picture frame slipping on a nail. My name is Avery Collins, and I am telling this story because that one sentence kept my life from detonating in front of a room full of people I was raised to serve dessert to and smile at no matter what. The dining room smelled like rosemary chicken and lemon cleaner, the kind of scent that says we tried, we care, see how everything shines. My mother had polished the silver and set out her best china, white plates with a gold ring that always made the food colder and the expectations hotter. My father lifted a glass in a casual toast about gratitude, and my sister's bracelets clinked like tiny bells every time she reached for more potatoes. If you had walked in at that exact second, you would have thought we were a commercial for Family Harmony. But I could feel a draft under the polished surface, the cold pull of a door that was about to open to a room I had never been permitted to enter, the room where the real conversations lived. I kept my posture perfect because she notices slouching, and I kept my smile easy because she photographs everything, and I kept my voice light because she hates when I sound certain. I squeezed the napkin in my lap until the fabric left a pattern on my fingers, and I listened to the clatter of utensils and the small theater of compliments that always plays before the curtain rises on whatever decision my mother has already made. She looked beautiful, of course. She always looks beautiful when there is a verdict coming. Her hair was swept up, a few strands curled on purpose to look effortless. Her earrings were the ones my grandmother left her, pearls the exact size of judgment. She reached for the gravy boat like a queen accepting tribute and asked me if the hospital still needed extra shifts, as if the question were a kindness and not an inventory of my usefulness. I heard myself answer in a voice I use for strangers who might become patients, steady and warm. I said yes, they always need help this time of year. And she smiled like I had confirmed the weather. My husband's hand was on my knee under the table, not pushing, not pulling, just there. A steady weight anchoring me to the chair when my brain wanted to climb out of the window and run down the street. He knows the way my mother's sentences land. He knows the way I absorb them like a sponge that thinks it is a stone. He could feel the tension gathering seconds before I could name it, the way you can feel a subway approaching before you hear or see it, a vibration in the rails that says brace now. The air around me sharpened. The room glowed brighter, a trick of the chandelier or my blood rising. My mother's voice softened, which is how I know she is about to cut. She asked my sister if the babysitter remembered the bedtime routine and asked my father if the tree service scheduled the trimming for next week, and then turned to me with that expression that looks like pride until the sentence arrives. She said my full name like a judge reads a file. I folded my hands on the table the way she taught me when I was 8, and still thought the rules were a path to peace instead of a maze. My husband leaned in, his breath warm against my ear, and said it again even softer. "Don't react until your mom leaves." He did not say it because he wanted me quiet. He said it because he wanted me safe. The last time I reacted in the room where my mother steers the ship, the price was a month of silence and a holiday card addressed to Mr. and Mrs. Collins with my name missing. I could feel more than hear the warning in his throat, the memory of the last storm and the map out of this one. The fork in my hand sounded too loud when I set it down. I tucked hair behind my ear and nodded like I had agreed to pass the salt. I felt my pulse in my wrists, in my jaw, in the place behind my knees that always gives me away. The dining room window showed the dark December evening like a television playing a quiet show I would rather be watching. The neighbor's porch light blinked on, off, on again, and the dog next door barked twice, like a metronome keeping time with the small betrayals that pass for conversation in this house. I told myself to catalog the details so I could remember later, so I could testify to my own life when the story was eventually questioned. The centerpiece was a wreath of eucalyptus and white berries. The butter was molded into a swan that listed slightly to the left, a tiny emblem of effort and imbalance. My sister wore a dress you could not sit comfortably in, and did anyway because discomfort is a currency here, You pay with your body so you can buy 2 hours of approval. My father asked about traffic and interest rates and a football game he never watches until someone important mentions it. The chair under me creaked when I shifted, a warning and a comfort, proof that the wood would hold. My mother dabbed her mouth with a napkin and thanked me for picking up the dessert from the bakery, as if I had not paid for it, as if I had only run an errand for a party I was lucky to attend. She told a story about a woman from her book club who lost her job because she asked for too much grace. And everyone laughed the way people laugh when they hear thunder and think it will not rain on their street. I watched her eyes do the calculation they always do before a reveal. She checked the clock. She checked my posture. She confirmed my husband's presence without granting him personhood. She lifted her glass. I could feel the hallway behind me, the coat closet packed with heavy winter things that smell like old perfume, the front door just beyond it, promising fresh air, and the sound of tires on cold pavement if I needed to step outside and remember who I was before I became a role. I inhaled and tasted lemon and something metallic that might have been panic. I reminded myself that I am not a child, that I am a 32-year-old nurse who has watched people fight their way back to breath and who has learned that survival is sometimes quieter than anyone expects. I repeated my name in my mind like a mantra, Avery Collins, as if anchoring it could keep me from drifting into the person my mother prefers. I thought about the reason I am telling this story, the reason I will keep telling it until the echo turns into a voice other people can hear. I am telling it because someone else is sitting at a table that looks perfect while they prepare to be erased. I am telling it because a whisper can be a life jacket, because a calm face can hide a wildfire, because the distance between silence and dignity is sometimes a single breath. The candles flickered. The room hushed. My mother's smile deepened into its decisive shape. I touched my husband's knuckles under the table and set my voice down beside my plate like a utensil I would pick up later. I looked at my mother and waited. The night it all began, the living room looked deceptively warm. A golden lamp glowed in the corner, casting soft light over framed family photos and neatly folded blankets draped on the couch. The smell of roasted chicken and garlic bread drifted in from the kitchen, the kind of aroma that should have meant comfort. But beneath it, there was something else, faint but sharp, like the metallic edge of tension waiting to be noticed. Everyone was gathered, just as we had planned for weeks. My husband, Aaron, sat beside me, shoulders slightly hunched, as if he were already bracing himself. Across the room, my mother, Linda, moved between the dining table and the counter with brisk precision. Her heels tapped against the hardwood floor, every step sharp, deliberate, like punctuation marks in a sentence that hadn't been spoken yet. My father sat silently in his recliner, staring at the muted television. He sipped from his glass as though he could make himself invisible if he just stayed quiet enough. Next to him, my younger brother, Michael, scrolled endlessly on his phone, the glow lighting up his distracted face. He hardly looked up when I walked in earlier. His girlfriend, Emily, perched beside him, flipping her hair with the kind of ease that only comes from feeling certain you belong. Her laughter, high and crisp, cut through the air each time Michael showed her something on his screen. At first, I tried to convince myself this was just another family dinner, a tradition we had all been clinging to, even as our lives pulled us in separate directions. I wanted to believe it was going to be easy, maybe even joyful. I had imagined us clinking glasses, exchanging small jokes, pretending, at least for a night, that the fractures between us were no more than hairline cracks. But the illusion began to unravel almost as soon as I sat down. My mother placed the serving bowl on the table without so much as glancing at me. It wasn't rude in the obvious sense. It was worse, carefully intentional, like she wanted me to notice the distance but not call it out. Aaron shifted in his seat, brushing his fingers against mine under the table, a small reminder that I wasn't imagining it. "Chicken's ready," Linda announced flatly. Her voice carried no warmth, no celebratory rise, just a statement, efficient and cool. I glanced around. No one seemed to think it was unusual. Michael chuckled at a meme. Emily leaned closer, whispering something in his ear that made him laugh harder. My father cleared his throat, an almost imperceptible sound, but he didn't meet my eyes. The first real crack came during a harmless exchange. I asked Emily about her new job, trying to sound friendly. She smiled, wide and rehearsed, then tilted her head toward Linda. Well, your mom's been so supportive. She gave me the best advice about negotiating my salary. Honestly, I don't know what I'd do without her. It was a simple comment, but it landed like a dart. I felt my chest tighten, not just from jealousy, but from the familiar ache of invisibility. That same advice, the one Linda had never once offered me in all my years of struggling through job interviews and rejection letters. My smile froze in place. I nodded, murmured something polite, but Aaron squeezed my hand again, firmer this time. He had caught it too. I told myself not to overreact. Maybe I was reading too much into it. Maybe tonight could still go smoothly. But the signs kept multiplying in subtle ways. When I reached for the bread basket, Linda slid it just slightly out of reach before setting it closer to Emily. When I commented on the flavor of the roasted vegetables, she replied, "Oh, I used the recipe Michael's always loved," her eyes shining at him, as though I had never once sat at this very table. Even the seating arrangement spoke louder than words. At first glance, it looked random, but the details revealed intent. My chair was angled slightly away at the corner, while the others formed a neat circle around the center of the table. It created the illusion that I was part of the group, yet set apart. Aaron noticed. His jaw tightened. He leaned closer and whispered what would soon echo in my mind for days. "Don't react until your mom leaves." The whisper was low, almost imperceptible, but it sent a ripple of heat through me. Why did he feel the need to say that now, here, at what was supposed to be a simple family dinner? My pulse quickened, and for the first time that evening, I realized something larger was unfolding beneath the surface. I forced myself to stay still, to keep my expression neutral, though inside, it felt as if the ground beneath me was shifting. The laughter from across the table grew sharper, louder, echoing off the walls. The silverware clinked against plates, each sound a reminder of how carefully I had to keep my composure. I didn't know it then, but this wasn't just about a dinner, or even about subtle slights. This was the beginning of a revelation that would peel back years of family dynamics, exposing truths I had been too afraid, or too hopeful, to face. And so, I sat there in the glow of the golden lamp, pretending nothing was wrong, waiting for the moment when everything I thought I knew about my family would crack wide open. As I sat at that table pretending nothing was wrong, the truth pressed against my ribs like a secret demanding to be spoken. The tension with my mother, Linda, had not appeared overnight. It was the product of years, carved into me through countless little slights, each one small enough to deny, yet sharp enough to leave a mark. Aaron's whisper still rang in my ears, but his warning only worked because we both knew exactly how far things could spiral. The first memory that rose up was my 24th birthday. I had just started working at the hospital, exhausted but proud of myself. I drove over to my parents' house expecting a cake or at least a small dinner. When I walked in, balloons covered the living room, but none of them were for me. A huge banner read, "Congratulations, Michael," and the night turned out to be a celebration of his new job offer. I remember standing in the corner, holding a plate of food that tasted like cardboard, while people patted him on the back and my mother kept saying how proud she was. I did not even hear my name mentioned once. When I finally tried to leave early, she pulled me aside and said, "Don't be dramatic, Avery. We didn't want to make a big deal out of your birthday because you don't like attention." I had never said that in my life, but I swallowed my words and drove home in silence, convincing myself it wasn't worth fighting over. Another time, during Christmas 3 years ago, I bought Linda a necklace I had saved up for over months. It was simple but elegant, silver with a small pearl in the center. She opened it, smiled thinly, and by the end of the night I found it resting at the top of the trash can, still in the box. I froze in the kitchen doorway, staring at it like it was evidence of a crime. My chest burned, but I said nothing. I told myself maybe she had not realized what it was. Maybe it had been a mistake. Later, Aaron pulled me aside and whispered, "You saw it too, right?" He had, and we both knew it was not an accident. It was a message. Then there was the family vacation I paid for 2 summers ago. I had covered the cost of the rental house near the lake because my father insisted it would be too expensive otherwise. I thought maybe if I helped, the week would finally feel like we were equals. Instead, Linda spent the entire trip talking about how thoughtful Emily was for bringing homemade cookies and how lucky Michael was to have such a considerate girlfriend. At the end of the trip, when people thanked Michael and Emily for hosting, I opened my mouth to correct them. But Linda's eyes cut across the room like a blade, daring me to ruin her version of the story. I shut my mouth, even as the check for that rental sat heavy on my credit card. These were not isolated events. They were a pattern, a design woven so carefully into the fabric of our family that outsiders would never notice. Linda always had a way of dismissing me without raising her voice, of cutting me down while smiling sweetly at everyone else. She never called it cruelty, only preference. She preferred Michael's taste in music, Emily's sense of style, my father's jokes. When she spoke of me, it was always with a caveat, a small hook at the end of the sentence. Avery works hard, but she can be difficult. Avery helps out, but she takes things too personally. Every compliment was poison before it reached my skin. I tried to tell myself that all families have their dynamics, that maybe I was too sensitive, that if I kept being patient, one day she would see me the way she saw Michael. But patience only taught her that I was safe to ignore. By the time Aaron whispered in my ear that night at the table, the weight of all those years pressed against me. It wasn't just tonight's breadbasket slid out of reach or the vegetables seasoned for someone else. It was every forgotten birthday, every discarded gift, every rewritten story. It was the way my father sat quietly in his recliner while it happened, sipping his drink like it wasn't his place to intervene. It was Michael's casual entitlement, the assumption that the spotlight belonged to him by default. And it was Emily's perfect smile, a reflection of everything Linda wished I were. I remembered one night about 6 months ago when I finally tried to confront Linda. We were alone in her kitchen after dinner, and I asked her straight out why she always seemed disappointed in me. She froze for a second, then laughed lightly, as though I had just made a silly joke. "Don't be ridiculous, Avery. You're imagining things." She brushed past me to wipe the counter, and the conversation ended there. But I carried it home like a stone in my pocket, heavy and undeniable. Now, sitting at the table with Aaron's hand steady on mine, I knew this dinner was not just another night. It was the next chapter in a story I had been trying to rewrite for years. The laughter around me sounded like static. The light above me felt too bright. My mother's eyes flicked toward me, calculating, preparing. And I understood that whatever was about to happen would not just bruise me for a night. It would cut deeper, carving itself into the story I would carry forever. I kept my smile in place, but inside, the truth shouted louder than the clink of silverware. This was not the beginning. It was the breaking point, years in the making. The moment arrived slowly, like a storm crawling across the horizon. I could feel it in the way Linda's smile sharpened at the edges, in the way the room seemed to hush whenever her gaze landed on me. My pulse thudded in my ears as I lifted my glass, pretending to sip, pretending to belong. Aaron's hand stayed firm against mine beneath the table, a quiet anchor reminding me not to move too quickly. My mother's voice floated through the air with a sweetness that never fooled me. She complimented Michael's new promotion, praised Emily's ambition, and even managed to throw in a gentle jab about how some people take too long to figure out their place in life. My cheeks burned, but I forced a smile. Aaron's whisper echoed again, "Don't react until your mom leaves." I thought maybe that would be enough. Maybe if I stayed silent, the storm would pass over me. But Linda had not spent decades perfecting her craft just to let me slip by untouched. She set down her fork with a soft clink, the kind of sound that silences a room. Her eyes sparkled as though she was about to share a fond memory, and everyone leaned in just slightly. She folded her napkin, dabbed her lips, and then, with the calm precision of a surgeon, she spoke my name. "Avery," she said, drawing it out like a curtain being pulled. My chest tightened. I was just telling Emily earlier how different life turned out for you. All those years of nursing school, and yet here you are, still chasing extra shifts? Still? She paused, tilting her head as though searching for the right word. Unsettled. The word hung in the air, heavy and deliberate. My stomach dropped. The air in the room shifted. Michael smirked faintly, and Emily glanced at me with a mixture of pity and curiosity. My father cleared his throat but said nothing. Erin's grip on my hand tightened. My mother wasn't finished. She leaned back in her chair, eyes locked on me, voice smooth as silk. You know, sometimes I wonder if you ever regret your choices. I mean, look at Michael. Look at Emily. They're building such a strong future together. Don't you ever wish you had taken a different path? Maybe if you were less stubborn. Her words sliced through me, each one carefully chosen to bruise without leaving a visible wound. My vision blurred for a moment, and I tasted iron in the back of my throat. I wanted to scream, to demand why my every achievement was always minimized, why my sacrifices were invisible, why love in this family felt like a currency I could never afford. But Erin's warning pulsed louder in my memory. Don't react until your mom leaves. I forced myself to stay still, but the effort felt like holding back a flood with bare hands. My mother smiled as though she had done me a favor, as though her cruelty was wisdom wrapped in lace. The table erupted in chatter again, Michael bragging about a new project at work, Emily nodding dutifully, my father muttering about the stock market. It was as if the blow had not landed, as if I were the only one bleeding. I could barely swallow the bite of chicken on my plate, every muscle in my body stiff with the effort of silence. Then came the final strike. Linda lifted her glass in a mock toast and said, "To family, to the ones who truly carry us forward." Her eyes flicked toward Michael, then Emily, never once toward me. The room clinked with glasses, laughter spilling over, and I sat frozen, glass untouched, heart pounding. Aaron leaned in close, his breath steady against my ear. "Hold on," he whispered. "Not yet." But something inside me cracked. It wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic, it was the quiet snap of a thread pulled too tight for too long. My smile slipped. My hand trembled. For the first time that evening, I felt the raw edge of truth rise up, a tide too strong to push back down. I thought of the birthday banner with Michael's name, the necklace in the trash, the vacation I paid for that was never mine. I thought of every time my mother had written me out of the story of my own family. And I knew, in that exact second, that silence was no longer survival. It was surrender. The candles flickered. The room filled with laughter I could not join, and I sat there on the brink of a choice. The storm was no longer crawling across the horizon. It was here, breaking open above us. And when it passed, nothing in that house would ever look the same again. The moment Linda set her glass down, the room shifted from a polite dinner into a stage where every hidden truth begged to be spoken. My heart pounded against my ribs so hard, I thought the entire table must have heard it. I could feel Erin's hands squeezing mine under the table, trying to ground me, but it was like holding a kite string in a hurricane. For years, I had let these moments pass, swallowed the hurt, convinced myself that silence meant peace. But this time, something inside me refused to be silenced. I placed my fork down gently, the small clink louder than any shout. Michael looked up, mid-laugh. Emily froze with her wine glass halfway to her lips, and my father shifted uncomfortably, as if he already knew what was coming but had no intention of stopping it. I turned to Linda, my voice steady but shaking at the edges, like a violin string pulled too tight. "Do you even hear yourself?" I asked. The words weren't loud, but they sliced through the room. The chatter died instantly. Linda's eyes widened for a fraction of a second before her smile returned, tighter this time, like porcelain about to crack. "Avery," she said smoothly, "this isn't the time." I leaned forward, feeling the heat rise in my face, but I didn't break eye contact. "It's never the time, is it? Not when you forgot my birthday. Not when you threw away my gift. Not when you let everyone think Michael paid for that vacation I covered. There's never a time because you've decided I don't deserve a place at this table." Michael chuckled nervously, trying to brush it off. "Come on, Avery. Don't make this dramatic." My eyes snapped to him, and for once, he looked away. Emily set her glass down and cleared her throat, but she stayed silent, clearly realizing this was not her battle. My father sighed heavily, rubbing his temples, but his silence screamed louder than any words. Linda's voice turned colder. "You're imagining things again. You always think the world is against you. Why would I ever treat you differently?" I laughed, but it came out bitter, like something broken. "Because you have. Over and over. Do you want me to list every time you made it clear that Michael is the golden child and I am just an afterthought? Or would you prefer I remind everyone here how you looked at me like a mistake the day I married Aaron? Aaron squeezed my hand harder, as if to steady me, but he didn't stop me. He knew this confrontation had been waiting too long. Linda's face hardened. You're ungrateful, Avery. Everything your father and I have done for you. I cut her off, my voice rising for the first time. Done for me? What have you done except tear me down? Every achievement I've had, you've diminished. Every sacrifice I've made, you've ignored. Do you even know what it feels like to grow up believing that no matter what you do, you'll never be enough? My voice cracked at the end, but the silence that followed was heavier than stone. Michael tried to laugh again, but his voice faltered. This is ridiculous, he muttered, though his eyes darted nervously between me and Linda. Emily reached for his arm, whispering something, but he brushed her off. My father finally spoke, his voice low and tired. Avery, maybe this isn't the right place to discuss family matters. I turned to him, the ache in my chest sharper than ever. The right place? You've sat in that chair for years watching her do this to me, and you never said a word. You let it happen, over and over. So don't tell me this isn't the right place. This is the only place, because it's the truth, and the truth has been waiting too long. Linda's face flushed red, the mask slipping for just a moment. You're trying to humiliate me in front of everyone, she snapped. I leaned back, my voice quieter now but sharper than ever. No, you did that yourself. I'm just finally saying out loud what you've made me feel all my life. The room was silent, except for the faint ticking of the clock on the wall. Aaron finally spoke, his voice calm but firm. She's not imagining things. I've seen it too. Every dinner, every comment, every time you dismissed her. You can't keep pretending this is all in her head. Linda's eyes flicked to him with fury, but she found no support around the table. Michael looked down at his plate. Emily kept her eyes on the glass in front of her. My father sighed again, sinking further into his chair. For once, Linda was alone, and she knew it. The silence stretched until it felt unbearable. Then Linda stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the hardwood floor. I don't have to listen to this, she snapped, her voice trembling with anger. She grabbed her coat from the back of the chair and stormed toward the door, her heels striking the floor like gunshots. The front door slammed, the sound echoing through the house like thunder. I sat there, breathing hard, my chest rising and falling as if I had just run a marathon. The room was still, the air thick with the weight of everything that had been said. Aaron's hand slipped into mine again, warm and steady. For the first time in years, I felt lighter, not because the battle was over, but because I had finally fought back. The silence after the front door slammed was louder than any argument. I sat frozen at the table, my chest heaving, my hands trembling, even as Aaron held on to me. For the first time in my life, I had not swallowed my pain, not forced myself to wear a smile while the room pretended everything was fine. I had spoken, and once the words left my mouth, they could never be taken back. Michael cleared his throat, but no words came out. Emily shifted uncomfortably in her seat, her perfect composure cracked by the weight of what she had witnessed. My father stared at the glass in his hand as though the bottom of it might offer an escape. No one moved to follow Linda. No one tried to defend her. And for once, no one dared to tell me I had been imagining things. The silence was its own kind of victory. Eventually, my father muttered something about needing air and disappeared into the backyard. Michael and Emily excused themselves, their exit awkward and hurried, leaving behind plates half filled with food that suddenly seemed tasteless. The house grew quiet, the golden light of the lamp flickering like a tired witness to everything that had unfolded. Aaron leaned toward me, his eyes steady and calm. You did it, he whispered. His words landed heavier than they sounded. I had done it. I had broken the cycle of silence, spoken the truth in the one place where it had always been forbidden. The relief came in waves, mixed with exhaustion, mixed with sorrow for the years I had lost waiting for love that was never freely given. That night, as I lay in bed with Aaron beside me, I thought about what family really means. I realized that sometimes blood does not guarantee safety. Sometimes parents cannot be what we hope. And sometimes the only way to heal is to stop asking for the approval that will never come. Linda's face haunted me, the fury, the shock, the refusal to accept what I had said. I knew she would tell her version of the story to anyone who would listen, painting me as ungrateful, difficult, even cruel. But for the first time, the thought did not break me, because the truth had been spoken, and no matter how she twisted it, those who had seen it with their own eyes could not unsee it. My father's silence, Michael's smirk fading, Emily's pity turning to discomfort, Aaron's unwavering defense, all of it was proof that my pain had not been invisible after all. In the days that followed, the phone calls came. First from my father, measured and vague, asking if I was ready to apologize. Then from Michael, his tone sharp, accusing me of ruining the family dinner. I let the calls go to voicemail. Aaron asked if I regretted it, and I told him no. How could I regret telling the truth after living so long in the shadows of denial? The cost of silence had been too high, and finally, I had chosen to stop paying it. Life did not transform overnight. The rift remained, raw and deep, but something inside me had shifted permanently. I stopped trying to contort myself into the shape Linda wanted. I stopped believing that if I worked harder, smiled wider, or stayed quieter, things would ever change. Instead, I chose myself. I chose to believe that my worth was not determined by a mother's approval or a brother's validation. I chose to believe that love should never feel like a battlefield where you are always losing. And maybe that is the lesson buried in the rubble of that night. Silence may protect peace for a moment, but only truth can set you free in the long run. Speaking up might cost you comfort. It might even cost you relationships, but it gives you back yourself. As I sit here now telling this story, I know someone listening has felt the same invisible weight at a dinner table, the same sting of being erased by the people who should have seen them most clearly. To you, I say, your pain is real, your story matters, and your voice deserves to be heard. Do not let anyone convince you that your truth is too heavy or inconvenient to speak. And if this story kept you watching until the end, if it resonated with the part of you that has ever been silenced, I invite you to stay with me. There are more stories like this, more lessons about the ways we survive, endure, and rise again. Subscribe to the channel so you do not miss the next chapter. Because sometimes, the act of listening to each other's truths is the first step toward healing our own.